Is here, Allison Manley, formerly of Catherine Ann Confections. And I see Barry Benson, who we were talking about before, our vice president of our board, and Randy Albers, our president. Della Levitt, I see is here. Bob Boone, Al Di Genova, the great publisher and poet. So many people that I know. So it's 7:01, so I am just going to get started. Welcome everybody to Chicago Love Classics. I am Don Evans. Many of you know me, some of you don't, as I'm looking at the participant role here. I started the Hall of Fame about 10 years ago. Our mission is to celebrate, honor, and preserve Chicago's great literary heritage. And we do that in a variety of ways, most of them which you can discover by just going to our website. That has a lot of information about us and what we're doing, our events and so forth. So that's the easiest way, just go to our website. One of the ways that we honor our living writers, in addition to events like tonight, is what we call the Fuller Award for Lifetime Achievement. And we give that to some of Chicago's best writers. And this year, in exactly 1 month, on March 13th, which is a Saturday night like tonight, we will be honoring Sandra Cisneros with our Lifetime Achievement Award. Sandra is in Mexico, and we will do the event virtual like tonight. One of the great advantages of doing things virtually, most of it is bad news, right? I mean, we miss not being together and being in person and being able to meet the authors and to have them sign your books and all that. That's all bad. But the good news is somebody like Sandra can be honored because with the Chicago Literary Hall of Fame's tiny budget, we haven't been unable to bring in authors from remotely. And so Sandra's able to do it. And the other great advantage is that there's no limitations on how many people can attend or from where they can attend. So we've done these events in the past at the Newberry Library, American Writers Museum, Poetry Foundation, great places, Chicago Public Library. But capacity anywhere from 100 to 200, and you got to be close enough to get there. So for this one in 1 month, I urge you again to go to our website, find the Sandra Cisneros event. And when you do, you can follow it, and there's a registration link. It's free and open to the public. Anybody can come, but you do have to register. So tonight, Chicago Love Classics. We're doing this in part because it's almost Valentine's Day. It's Valentine's Day Eve, I suppose. But we're also doing it as part of sort of a variation of a program that Randy Albers started with Rick Kogan back when Randy was running the Story Week Festival through Columbia College. Randy founded that. He ran it for 19 years. In the last, maybe, I'm guessing, Randy could go into the chat and tell us if I'm wrong. I think it was about the last 7 years, they did an event called Chicago Classics. And what him and Rick had decided over drinks one day when Randy was asking for ideas for a dynamic program, the suggestion that Rick gave him was get a bunch of people together, whether they're bus drivers or electricians or secretaries or writers or whomever, and have them each read a little passage from their favorite Chicago book. And Randy has now retired from Columbia College, and he is our board president, and he is doing wonderful work in that capacity, as is Barry Benson and all of our other board members, Roberta. But Randy has really helped to lay a foundation for the Hall of Fame that we didn't have in the first 8 years because of me, mostly, because I don't do some of those things well, and Randy and Roberta and Barry and Amy and Mary and the other board members all do that well. And so anyways, Randy, and I talked, and we were going to revive it this year, but or we were going to revive it last year in person. And of course, we all know how that turned out. So instead, we started putting Chicago Classics on the website. and having people read a little piece of it. And tonight, since we have these glorious authors in our presence, we're going to have them read a little bit from their own work and then a little bit from somebody else's. So that's kind of the background. I want to encourage everybody to buy their books, not only because it's a great thing to do to support the authors here tonight, but because our independent bookstores in Chicago and elsewhere are so vital to the book world. And in order for authors to thrive, bookstores have to thrive. And in order for bookstores to thrive, you have to buy the books. So you can find the bookseller, Susie Tackett's is here tonight, the owner of the great Lincoln Square bookstore, the bookseller. She's amongst our attendants tonight. Buy from the bookseller or go to our website and you will find an index, Chicago Literary Hall of Fame.org/resources/bookstores. And you can see an index of all of our great bookstores. And if you have any doubt that the pandemic is hitting the bookstores hard, we've already lost the great City Lit in Logan Square, and many others are just barely surviving. So please support not only these authors, but our great bookstores. Two sponsors tonight, Catherine Ann Confections. They sent each of our authors tonight a little gift bag, which is, according to Depika, quite good. She got hers yesterday and she consumed it immediately. Some, nice homemade marshmallows to go with some special hot chocolate. So thank you for Catherine Ann Confections. And then thank you for Smart Dating Academy. So Valentine's Day is like the Super Bowl, for dating gurus like Bella Gandhi. And Bella Gandhi, I wanted her to be here tonight. And of course, she's busy because it's, her Super Bowl. But she said she would support us and she gave us a little bit to help cover our cost tonight. So Smart Dating Academy, for those of you who are feeling this Valentine's Day like, you need some help, go to Bella. All right, and that is about it. I'm going to turn this over now to Michele Morano. I just want to say I'm so pleased that we have all these great authors here tonight. They're not only world-class writers, but they're, great, people too. These are the kind of people you can bring in, you can have over for a cocktail party. They're polite company. In fact, Depika sent me a text message yesterday and she asked, is it okay, the reading I'm doing, if I use the word fuck? It'll only be once. And I thought, well, it's Valentine's Day. Is one fuck going to be enough? And so I gave Depika permission, but that's the kind of polite company we have here. She's not just going to say it, she's going to ask first. So now let's have Michele Morano take you through the rest of the readings, and welcome everybody, and have a nice evening.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Don, for organizing this. And thanks to the Chicago Literary Hall of Fame for all the great work you do, and also for finding many, many ways to bring us together, especially during this time when we're all so isolated. I'm really happy to be here with the other writers tonight, and I'm very happy to host. It's funny that you said that, Don, because I was thinking I wish that hosting meant that I could have you all over for cocktails and some food, but I guess this is the next best thing. So Don has provided a very detailed, I'm grateful for this, a very detailed schedule of how things are going to go. And so what we're planning is that each author will each read from our own work, and then we'll each read from a Chicago classic work. And I think it's a great way to spend, Valentine's Eve, or for fans of Parks and Rec, Galentine's Day, which is the made-up friend holiday. So I'm going to begin by reading from my recent memoir and essays, which is called Like Love. This is a book that is about unconsummated romance. So I'm very interested in crushes and infatuations and all of the many various kinds of entanglements we get ourselves into throughout our lives, some of them inappropriate and some wonderfully appropriate, and all fairly educational. So I'm going to read from an essay that's called Ars Romantica. And this is about one of those unconsummated romances with, in this case, a landlord. Ben Bishop was a retired art professor who owned the house I shared with one man during the time I was seeing a second. The second man knew about the first, but not the other way around, and Ben Bishop knew about everything, but didn't mention it. We talked instead of our work, our travels. I had recently moved back to New York State from a year in Spain, which interested Ben because he'd once spent a summer with a woman in Malaga. The way his voice softened as he said this, eyebrows wrinkling above black framed glasses, told me it had been an unspeakable time, happy and sad, thrilling and dangerous. We became fast friends. In restaurants, I noticed others noticing us. Ben's white hair and mustache, my unwrinkled skin, our cocktails and laughter. And how could I fault their conclusions? We were dating, Ben and me, all through that fall and into the winter, a period of brilliant colors fading to shadows and light. Ben lived at the end of a long driveway in a ramshackle house filled with riches. He'd been a painter all his life until macular degeneration began to erase detail. Now he sculpted in a workshop off the living room where tables and shelves held large clay images. A life-sized hawk spread its wings, each feather responding to the wind. A curious child bent over a patch of grass, a 3-foot high bull with angular muscles and fearsome genitalia stood guard. I lived next door in a blue house with pink shutters where I worked alone most weekdays. The man I had lived with worked several hours away, returning on weekends. And during the week, Ben sometimes called in the late afternoon, his voice gruff with the day's silence. Got anything in your fridge, sweetheart? He might have leftover lasagna and 3 oranges, to which I'd add the makings of a salad and a bottle of wine. We'd agree to meet at his place at 6, and from the moment I hung up the phone, the day shimmered. Loneliness evaporated, buoyancy took over. The last hour of work was the most productive of all. The walls of Ben's house were crowded with paintings, charcoal drawings, pencil and ink sketches. Most were gifts from friends around the world, artists who lived by their talents and gave plenty away. On each visit, Ben and I chatted through the rooms, the studio with its cool clay scent, the living room with layers of handmade rugs, the kitchen bursting with color, yellow walls, red cabinets, exposed pipes painted blue and green. Everywhere I looked were images worth lingering in front of, and Ben was always happy to lead a tour. In the dining room, we talked about the shading of a portrait at eye level. On the stairway, we leaned against the railing, admiring the work of a collage artist. Before dinner, we'd have 2, maybe 3 martinis, then switch to whatever wine I'd brought, and later there would be a nightcap of brandy or cognac, more than I could drink in an evening before or since. Ben's gruff exterior softened with each pour, though he never seemed drunk, and I never felt that way. I felt charged up, connected to something I couldn't name. Ben asked questions and listened to the answers, both of us musing about books and movies and why people act the way they do. After we'd washed and dried the dishes and divided the leftovers, he'd walk me to the door and say, "That was a good time, sweetheart, let's do it again." The walk home from the reach of Ben's porch light through darkness to the reach of my porch light felt magical. Partly it was the drinks and the way Ben conversed as if my life experience were on par with his, but mostly it was the studio, the walls, the sculptures and paintings and sketches, the intimacy of all that expression. This was years before researchers at the University of London learned that looking at an appealing work of art stimulates the same areas of the brain as having a crush on a person. Years before I began to understand why I'd float home from Ben's house feeling dizzy in love. I'd make a cup of tea and wrap in a blanket, then sit on the porch and look at the stars. Even when the temperature fell below freezing, I wanted to be out in the world, inhaling deeply, enjoying all that craving. I'll stop there and happily introduce Dipika Mukherjee. Depika is the author of the novel Shambhala Junction, which won the UK Virginia Prize for Fiction, and Ode to Broken Things, which was longlisted for the Man Asian Literary Prize, as well as Rules of Desire, a collection of short stories. Her work is included in the Best Small Fictions 2019 and appears in World Literature Today, Asia Literary Review, Del Sol Review, and Chicago Quarterly Review, among others. She's a contributing editor for Jaggery and teaches at Story Studio Chicago and at the Graham School at University of Chicago. She holds a doctorate in English sociolinguistics. Welcome.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, everyone. It's such a delight to be here on this, Valentine's Day reading. So I am choosing to read from the South Asian American issue of the Chicago Quarterly Review, and it's a poem by Ifti Naseem. Ifti Naseem is a Pakistani American poet who passed away in 2011, and he lived in Chicago for most of his life and was inducted into the Chicago Gay and Lesbian Hall of Fame. And he was a fierce defender of gay rights at a time when it was dangerous to be so. So I am very proud to read this poem that is titled, "A Boy Taught Me How to Kiss a Girl." A Boy Taught Me How to Kiss a Girl by Ifti Naseem. Playing cricket was praying 5 times at once. Every evening after, we all gathered in the school ground, like a different set of animals around the watering hole in Serengeti. Some playing hockey, some football, some doing nothing, reading, watching, some predators. We both were sweating, rather drenching. We jumped in the swimming pool. My fear of water and drowning came over me. He knew. He held my arm and waist and made me swim. Coming back home at dusk, he looked around. Under a mango tree, he held my face in his palms and put his lips on mine. Fragrance of freshly dropped rain on hot earth surged in my palate. I was tasting cloud. "That's how you kiss a girl," he whispered in my ear. Thank you.
Thank you. That is so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, that line, "I was tasting cloud," is going to stay with me. Yeah, fabulous. Okay, we'll move on to Jacqueline Mitchard. Is the author of 23 books of fiction and nonfiction for adults, young adults, and children, with more than 3 million copies in 34 languages worldwide. Her first novel, The Deep End of the Ocean, was the inaugural selection of the Oprah Winfrey Book Club, and she has won or been shortlisted for prizes including the Orange Prize for Fiction, the Shirley Jackson Award, the Heartland Prize for Fiction, and others. A native of Chicago, she lives on Cape Cod with her family, and her next novel, Dreamland Murderland, will be published in May by Mira HarperCollins.
Thank you. And thank you for, it's so nice to be back home again, even virtually. I don't really have a lighthouse behind me, but if you saw what I really do have behind me, you would know why I have the virtual background. Anyway, this is a very short page from near the end of this upcoming novel, which I won't tell you the plot of it, but it's about two mothers who have a son, who have a son and a daughter, one each, who are involved with each other in the most horrifying way you can imagine. And well, maybe not anyway. And it is it's sort of, the novel sort of asks the question, would you rather lose the one you love most or have the one you love most do the worst possible thing? So, okay, and this is near the end. Not the end, but near the end. Now I know that when you lose a child, it's not the same as losing a contemporary, even a beloved husband or wife. When you lose a child, you grieve as a child grieves, which is to say, you grieve backward. You don't get better. As time passes, you get worse. Time does not take you closer to acceptance, only farther from the one you love. Day by day, Belinda slipped away from Jill. Season by season, the clothes in Belinda's closet were no longer the current style. The music on her player was not the music other kids listened to anymore. Year by year, other people's daughters and sons, once the same age as Belinda, grew up and they did the things Belinda would have done. They graduated college and started medical school or graduate school. They joined the Peace Corps. They backpacked across Europe. They found their first jobs. They learned to sign contracts and leases and health insurance forms. Some of them got engaged. The more of those milestones that passed, the more meaningless the world became. Jill did not get stronger. She only got older. She got older without her only. The very good memories, silly small things, the way Belinda cried when a dog died in a movie, the gleam of sunscreen on her small shoulder when she was a child at the beach, the color of the Christmas wrapping paper she stamped by hand, the way Belinda hummed as she made her oatmeal, the way she wrapped her long hair in an old t-shirt to dry. These things began to lose their sharp edges. The sound of a laugh that was like Belinda's, the sudden burst of a song Belinda loved when Jill turned on her car radio, the smell of freesia, a scrawl of words on an old grocery list in the bottom of a drawer, buy strawberries. All these had to be wrenched out of her mind and compacted like trash until they were no longer familiar or even recognizable. These very good memories once scalded Jill like zinc in her eyes, but she realized that the scalding was better, much better, because at least it was feeling, and feeling had washed off her like sidewalk chalk in the rain. The scalding grief was better because it was the dark twin of the stupefying love you felt for your child. When you first beheld your child with a passion so much bigger than anything you expected to feel, so much bigger than any other parent's love, so magnificent you had to keep it secret, lest the bored gods notice and knock it out of your hands. Jill's love for her only was a second son. And as the sun disappeared, minute by hour, by day, by week, by month, by year, so did her reason. Thank you.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I love the way that love and grief and acceptance kind of swirl together. I think that's a really common trio. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to Peter Orner.
Very beautiful.
Peter is a 3-time winner of the Pushcart Prize and the author of 6 books, including Maggie Brown and Others, a New York Times notable book, an Oprah Magazine Top 10 book for 2019, and winner of the Edward Lewis Wallant Award for Jewish Fiction. His novel, Love and Shame and Love, won the California Book Award, and his essay collection, Am I Alone Here? Notes on Reading to Live and Living to Read, was a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award. Orner received the Rome Prize from the American Academy of Arts and Letters, as well as a Guggenheim Fellowship, and his work has appeared in the Atlantic Monthly, the New Yorker, the Paris Review, and Best American Stories. He teaches at Dartmouth College and lives with his family in Norwich, Vermont, where he's a member of the fire department. You win for the coolest bio element. Thank you, Peter.
I'm a very low level volunteer. If I show up at the fire, you're in trouble, because it means that somebody else is away that can actually put the thing out. But I do have a blast doing it. Thank you so much, Michelle. Thank you, Don. This is a really nice event. I'm actually I'm in Highland Park right now, but I live in Vermont, and it's nice to be with you all, and I'm honored. I'm going to read two tiny sections from a novel called Love and Shame and Love, which is set in Chicago, and it's about 3 generations of the Popper family, all of which are really bad at love, I suppose, and it's a book about loneliness across the generations. And but this is a piece with the younger generation actually producing the 4th generation, actually, as we speak. It's called Heatwave, and it's set in 1995. You'll remember that summer. July 1995. On the news, the old people were dying like flies in sweltering apartments. No, not like flies. Flies died with more dignity. Popper sat on the stoop in front of 1233 North Damon, trying to breathe, a wad of twisted Kleenex up his nose. It had been too hot for sexual congress for weeks. Popper philosophizes. If sneezing is a form of orgasm, then you could say that all total celibacy really amounts to is not sneezing. I mean, I love sneezing. Who doesn't love sneezing? But I can... Cat just back from a run. All through those panting days, the heat index up to 120 degrees, Cat ran the melting streets. Her face red, her neck, her hair sweat stuck to her ears. 10 days ago at 3 a.m, they went to the Golden Nugget for the air conditioning. Out of mercy, Cat gave him a hand job using the oil from the salad dressing rack on the table. Since then, nothing. Why are you squeezing your nose? Cat said. I'm trying not to sneeze, Popper said. I'll make salad, Cat said, and went inside. The door whacked. She'd recently been accepted into the graduate program in philosophy at the University of Chicago, and now everything she did was terrible and purposeful. Now she ran. Now she made graduate school salad. That night, their sweat pooling in the hollow of their futon, Popper said, I could lie beside you like a Sunday roast. Who said that? Cat said. I forget, Popper said. A.J. Liebling, maybe? No, he probably just said, I want to lie by a roast. She raised her head and kissed him, daintily, uncat-like, as a small reward for stealing a line, for A.J. Liebling. Now she brought a tall tower of books to bed with her every night, and she fell asleep holding Hannah Arendt. The 3 fans only flung the heat around and made it hotter. He stood up, yanked the light cord, that cord that dangled above their lives as they slept like some ceiling god was fishing for them. Hey, I'm reading, Cat said. You were snoring, Popper said. I've never snored once in my entire life, Cat said. He stood up again and yanked the light back on. Cat went back to sleep with the book in her hands, snored. He snuggled closer to her. Did you know that the Nazis forbade Jews asparagus? I mean, what kind of bureaucrat thinks that shit up? Popper. Well, I've rounded them up, machine gunned them, gassed them alive, stomped on their baby. Now let's forbid them an esoteric vegetable. Cat opened her eyes a crack, read a paragraph of her book. Then she said, why is it always back to the Nazis? Jesus, that's it. It's so obvious. Nazis give you a heart. It must be the sadness, Popper said. Aaron says, Kat said, that there isn't anything particularly unique about the Nazis, only that they were better accountants than, say, Kublai Khan or Oliver Cromwell. The sadness, Popper said, the grief, it must be, it must increase the old firepower. Aaron's completely full of shit. And Kublai Khan was in it for territorial expansion. I forget who Cromwell was. A mean Englishman? I remember Benny Hill doing some bit. Go slow, Popper. Slow. Woo me a little. Her naked already, him naked but for his socks hat. And if they could have torn their skins off, they would have. Take off your hot hat, Popper. Never, he said. Like two wet seals thumping. They kept losing their grips on each other's greasiness. Cat almost fell off the bed. 2.5 minute tops. He edged downward. Let me correct the imbalance. No, she said, not now. She got up, took another shower. He stared at the bulb above the bed and listened to the trickling of the water. They had very low water pressure that summer. The whole city did, according to the Eyewitness News. He stared at the bulb and thought of the water slowly falling, draining down her body into the abyss of the drain. Thank you.
Wow, that's beautiful.
A little.
Very beautiful, wonderful.
Thanks.
Mm.
And nice to remember heat.
Yeah.
At this moment. Not that extreme heat, but it's quite a contrast. Yeah, thank you. That was beautiful.
Nice to think about heat right now.
What's that? Roberta?
Oh, she said, nice to have the heat too.
Okay. Yeah, so we're doing well on time. So I just want to encourage people, if you have any questions, just pop them into the chat. And when we're done with the next round of readings, hopefully we'll have a minute or two to address any of them. So now we're going to do the round again. I'm going to move into a reading of the opening of a novel that I read many years ago and absolutely loved. And so I will confess publicly now that I have a huge longstanding crush on the Chicago-born and raised writer Ana Castillo. And so I'm going to read the opening of her novel, Peel My Love Like an Onion, which is a novel that, as I was looking over it in preparation for this evening, I realized I think may actually have influenced, without my being conscious of it at all, some of the book that I've just published. So I'm really excited about this. So this is, as many of you know, the story of Carmen Santos, who is a Chicana flamenco dancer in Chicago. She's also a polio survivor, so she has overcome a weakness in one leg to become an amazing flamenco dancer. And when the book opens, she is a little past her prime as a dancer and mourning not one, but two love affairs, simultaneous love affairs, and trying to sort out what's going to happen next in her life. Uno. I remember him dark, or sometimes I remember it darkly. Yes, he was dark. He still is, except that it is not easy to think of him as still existing, and everywhere my gaze turns, he isn't there. What's the expression, water, water everywhere? I was full, a vessel, a huge pre-Columbian pot, a copal burning brazier, a funeral urn, a well, Jill's bucket up and down, a bruja's kettle simmering over the fire. I was in love once. When you're in love, no single metaphor is enough. No metaphor appears, just a tad cliched. You are dizzy with desire. Yes, dizzy, virtual vertigo. Someone catch me, I'm falling in love. Nothing too serious, no ambulance will be necessary. Just a few days of bed rest is needed, I'm sure, with him. Your very saliva tastes sweet in your own mouth, as a friend once stated, matter-of-fact-like. The science of being in love. She looked around the table, a group of middle-aged women having an evening out. We had all been in love at some time, hadn't we? Surely we knew about saliva and its emotionally triggered alchemy. You know what I mean? When you're in love, even tap water tastes sweet. Your own saliva is sweet, she insisted in her Argentine accent. We looked around too, smiling a bit uncomfortably. We looked down at our fancy coffee and desserts. We were thankful when our waiter broke the silence and poured more coffee, dropped those little plastic containers of cream on the table. You know what I mean, don't you? She asked again. Maybe that's love in Buenos Aires. But you must be really in love for the cliche to bounce back like a boomerang, smack dab between the eyes with a ring of the gospel truth to your born again ears. Nevertheless, it happens. Love that is riddled with cliches, but has never happened to either of you quite that way before. Therefore, it cannot be a cliche for you. Love that happens abruptly, without warning, like a summer shower. You see what I mean about metaphors? And yes, it is light and warm and sudden. The rainbow appears afterward on your power walk at the end of a long, stressed out day, and the city is gray all over, and your mother is in the hospital, and your best friend's brother is fighting AIDS, and you remember the night you slept with him when you were not in love, and neither was he, a long time ago. You put on your new cross trainers assembled in a foreign land by women and children at slave wages. So you try not to think of what you paid for them and begin to walk the streets of your city at sunset. You say your city the way some Americans say this is their country. You never feel right saying that, my country. For some reason, looking Mexican means you can't be American. And my cousins tell me, the ones who have gone to Mexico, but who were born on this side like me, that over there, they're definitely not Mexican. Because you were born on this side, pocha is what you're called there by your unkind relatives and strangers on the street, and even waiters in restaurants when they overhear your whispered English and wince at your bad Spanish. Still, you try at least. You try like no one else on earth tries to be in two places at once. Being pocha means you try here and there, this way and that, and still you don't fit, not here and not there. But you can say this is my city because Chicago is big and small enough to be your city, to be anybody's city who wants it, anybody at all. Like Nelson Algren said right around the time you were born, Chicago forever keeps two faces. One face for go-getters and one for go-get-it-yourselfers. One for the good boy and one for the bad. And I loved the good boy and the bad one, and sometimes they were one and the same. Thank you. Thank you to Ana Castillo. And now we'll move on to Depika, actually, who's going to read from her own work now and say the word fuck.
Thank you, Michelle. And that was a wonderful reading. I enjoyed that so much. Thank you. All right, I'm going to read from Rules of Desire, which is my short story collection. And I need to set it up a bit because I'm not starting from the beginning of this story, but kind of from the middle. And a 50-something-year-old man who is a con artist in the US and Mexico goes to India to find a bride. And he starts interviewing them in a very fancy hotel. And his bride-to-be is walking in. And that's where, I will begin to read. The title of the story is The Conjurer of Divinity. The door swung open and another woman walked in. "Hello," she said. "My name is Sheena." He straightened the paperweight on the desk and stood up, holding out his hand. Her fingers felt soft, the tips perfectly pearly pink. As she seated herself, he glanced at the mirror. So far, so good. He liked that she hadn't put on a sultry voice or bent across the desk to shake his hand while flashing her cleavage. She had short, spiky hair, and he liked what he saw. He looked at his notes. She was 36. "Aren't you worried about the age difference?" He always started bluntly, keeping an eye on the time. "I don't want any children, and you're still young enough to have them." "I'm not at all maternal." He could see her relax. She hadn't hesitated, not even slightly. He read the form. Her eyes were running across the line of his shoulders just as he looked up. The whistle from the room freshener had broken the silence. He liked women who didn't start yapping to fill a room with noise, and this woman continued to sit silently across from him, back straight, unperturbed, just taking him in without looking away. He held up her questionnaire and glanced through her height and weight. She was born in Delhi and had a degree in English literature. He leaned forward. You're not a closet vegetarian, are you? I mean, it says here you eat meat, but some Indians prefer to be vegetarian and eat meat only on some days. I can't live like that. No worries, she replied. He paused for a while. And do you enjoy intercourse? Whether she was 18 or 36, an Indian woman was supposed to save herself for the marriage bed. And whether that was the case or not, nobody ever asked the bride. The question sounded, well, a little crude, especially coming so soon. Should she tell this man, I have enjoyed intercourse with many men, traveling wayfarers who have stopped at the Imperial Bookstore and fucked me in their rooms, sometimes inviting me for weekends in Jaipur and Goa, once a 2-week jaunt to Phuket. That the men were always married or taken, and my longest relationship was with Geert, the impossibly tall Dutch engineer who for 2 years had led me silently to hope every time he returned to Delhi for a month or two, but even that had petered into silence. That I prefer sex a little rough, the talk dirty, the men generous afterwards, in rooms with luxurious white sheets, attached to bathrooms with white bidets, preferably with ocean waves outside to soothe me to sleep. I do enjoy intercourse, yes, said Sheena. Good, he said. I need sex at least twice a week. This was a matrimonial interview, although unlike any Sheena had encountered before. She examined the patterned carpet, wondering whether he would ask to have sex immediately to try her out. This non-resident Indian was making her feel both gauche and unprepared. But he was too smooth for that. He started to tell her about his lifestyle now, not boasting of his wealth, but describing how he had come far from his childhood, far from the difficulties of growing up in India. That his strongest memory was of lining up for rations of rice, sugar, and wheat, commodities that were mixed with bits of stone and earth to make them heavier. He described the dusty heat and how small he felt, standing in line with his father, jute bags in hand, every single month at the cooperative. Nobody does that anymore, said Sheena. No ration cards? We have them, but only the servants collect rations. We go to the supermarket. Yes, of course. Servants and supermalls. She thought she heard derision, but it was masked by a smile. I have a question, actually. Please. Why the advertisement in the papers? Couldn't you just have gone through some matrimonial website? Some sort of shadi.com? I have no relatives in India anymore, so an advertisement seemed like a good idea. I tried to find someone through dating sites in Mexico and in the US, but sometimes you just want someone who'll speak your language, even if it's not Bengali. You know? He was as self-assured in person as that outrageous advertisement had suggested. He smelled of woody cologne and his fingernails tapered to manicured edges. There was an expensive cleanliness about him that would take her very far away indeed from the tiny flat in Pashchim Vihar, from her daily commute on Delhi's filthy public transport. That's it.
That was wonderful. So funny and surprising. Yeah, that was terrific. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Beautiful. I think, Jacqueline, you're up next for the Chicago Classics reading.
Yes, I am. And I am reading just a little bit from Sandra Cisneros. Sandra Cisneros is a dual citizen of Mexico and Chicago, Mexico and Chicago. And I have only met her once. She and I both grew up on the west side of Chicago. The house on Mango Street is really, I believe, North Camp Street. I think it is North Camp Street, which was not far from where my life started, right around the same time as hers, within a few years. Campbell Street, someone says here. I don't know. Yes, Campbell Street, but she didn't want to confuse it with the soup. And that's why she changed it to Mango Street. And she has been a champion of other writers of color, younger writers, and furthering their careers, and is, besides being a terrific writer, a role model in that regard. And I am going to read just 2 pages from The House on Mango Street. And they're my favorite 2 pages. We didn't always live on Mango Street. Before that, we lived on Loomis on the 3rd floor. And before that, we lived on Keeler. Before Keeler, it was Paulina. And before that, I can't remember. But what I remember is moving a lot. Each time, there'd be one more of us. By the time we got to Mango Street, we were 6. Mama, Papa, Carlos, Kiki, my sister Nenny, and me. The house on Mango Street is ours. And we don't have to pay rent to anybody or share the yard with the people downstairs. There isn't a landlord banging on the ceiling with a broom, but even so, it's not the house we thought we'd get. We had to leave Loomis quick. The water pipes broke, and the landlord wouldn't fix them because the house was too old. We had to leave fast. We were going to the washroom next door and carrying water over in empty gallon jugs. That's why Mama and Papa looked for a house, and that's why we moved into the house on Mango Street, far away on the other side of town. They always told us one day we would move into a real house, a house that would be ours for always, so we wouldn't have to move each year. And our house would have running water and pipes that worked, and inside it would have real stairs, not hallway stairs, but stairs inside, like houses on TV, and we'd have a basement and at least 3 washrooms. So when we took a bath, we wouldn't have to tell everybody. Our house would be white with trees around it, a great big yard and grass growing without a fence. This was the house Papa talked about when he held up a lottery ticket. And this was the house Mama dreamed up in the story she told us before we went to bed. But the house on Mango Street is not the way they told it at all. It's small and red with tight steps in front and windows so small you'd think they were holding their breath. Bricks are crumbling in places, and the front door is so swollen you have to push hard to get in. There is no front yard, only 4 little elms, the city planted by the curb. Out back is a small garage for the car we don't own yet, and a small yard that looks smaller between the 2 buildings on either side. There are stairs in our house, but they're ordinary hallway stairs. The house has only 1 washroom. Everybody has to share a bedroom. Mama and Papa, Carlos and Kiki, me and Nenny. Once when we were living on Loomis, a nun from my school passed, and she saw me playing out in front. The laundromat downstairs had been boarded up because it had been robbed 2 days before, and the owner had painted on the wood, "Yes, we're open," so as not to lose business. "Where do you live?" she asked. "There," I said, pointing up to the 3rd floor. "You live there?" "There." I had to look to where she pointed, the 3rd floor, the paint peeling, wooden bars Papa had nailed on the windows so we wouldn't fall out. "You live there?" The way she said it made me feel like nothing. "There. I lived there." I nodded. I knew then I had to have a house, a real house, one I could point to. But this isn't it. The house on Mango Street isn't it. For the time being, Mama says. Temporary, says Papa. But I know how those things go.
Thank you. Oh, so beautiful. Wonderful. And then Peter, you're up next.
Such a beautiful reading of that, those pages from House on Mango Street. Thank you, Jacqueline. I'm going to read a little bit from a story by Bette Howland, great Chicago writer, somebody who in the last few years has been sort of, quote, rediscovered, a phrase I'm somewhat dubious of. She didn't go anywhere. Her work didn't go anywhere. It just wasn't being read. But thankfully now it is, thanks to the work of Bridget Hughes at a public space magazine in Brooklyn, bringing out her reissuing Bette Howland's great books. But she's one of the great writers of recent memory from Chicago. And this is a story called Blue Chicago, and I'm just going to read a couple of pages. It's a family on the way to a wedding. It goes from the south side to uptown and then out on Eden's Highway north. My Uncle Rudy's height and hulking shoulders filled the space behind the wheel. A huge man, 6'4", 250 pounds, crew cut, bullet headed. The thick, close shaved folds of his skin lay on his neck. Even from the back, in his checked gray suit, you could tell a cop. I looked at the back of his head, wondering what he was thinking. Impenetrable. His head seems too small for the big body. His nose is a beak. When his nose got broken somehow on maneuvers, the army doctors wanted to make it over for him, but Rudy wouldn't hear of it. Why kibitz with destiny? He's somewhat deaf, you know. He lost the hearing of one ear in the service. He could have an operation for nothing, but he never will. Who needs another hole in the head? One's enough. It was April. The wind was blowing, fresh, tender soot, swirling papers, and fancifully in the gutters of uptown, my grandmother's neighborhood. The sky was heavy and full of gloom, but here and there a splinter, a gleam. Rudy pulled into the thick of the grimy, sluggish traffic, deaf or indifferent to our female conversation. I couldn't believe we were going to talk about my Aunt Roxanne's hair all the way to the wedding. Roxanne is Uncle Rudy's young wife, a big, handsome Southern girl, raw-boned, rock-jawed, her pale head dropped over her knitting, peculiarly pale, translucent, like rock candy, and almost as brittle. Oh, you did something to your hair, my mother remarked as we climbed in back. I don't like it, Roxanne said at once. Go back and make them do it over, my mother said. You pay enough, don't you? It smells pretty though, my grandmother said, sniffing through the glitter of rhinestone frames. Roxanne flicked the yarn irritably over her forefinger. I don't like it, and so on. Hey, which way you going? My mother sat up suddenly erect, her striking white head looking all about. She was in black and white from head to toe, stark contrast, dark mink stole, long evening skirt, pointed shoes. I thought you were going to take Sheridan. Ha! We'd be there tomorrow, I took Sheridan, Rudy said, looking over his shoulder and showing the dark spaces in his teeth. He has a loud, offended voice, the result of his partial deafness. You mean to tell me you're going to take the Edens Expressway? Naturally. What do you think? I'm taking Edens. Edens? Who ever heard of something so stupid, taking Edens? My mother was rummaging in her purse. She took out a mimeographed sheet, a map of directions to the church in one of the northernmost suburbs. It had come with the invitations, and shoved it across the seat at her brother's big back. Here, look, you go straight out Sheridan. You'll be there in 15 minutes. You should have driven your own car. You want to take Sheridan. Rudy sat unmoved, eyes level, watching traffic in the mirror. I wouldn't say nothing more if I was you. Roxanne turned sideways in her seat to view my mother. We're liable to end up in Milwaukee. You know how stubborn Rudy is. Yes, he's had riot training. But my mother does not know how to desist. The irresistible force meets the immovable object, a routine encounter for her. After a while, she sat back, however, and began whispering to me, stating her case, thrusting the map under my nose. I'd already been en route an hour and a half from Hyde Park just to get to my grandmother's house, and I couldn't make heads or tails of it. That displeased her. She got angry with me, rattling the map in my face, her own face startlingly sallow under her beautiful white hair. She must have seen I had no sympathy with her either. I couldn't help that. My mother's panic is an old and potent enemy of mine. It was now noon. The wedding was called for 12:30. And when they say 12:30, they mean 12:30, my mother said, laying her hand to her cheek. That's not Jewish time, you know. They're late to the wedding. So great. Bet Howland, Blue Chicago. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. That's fabulous. Okay, so we're done with the readings. I have to say, I'm just so happy to have been, just to be here, let alone be part of it. So I just want to spend my Valentine's Day reading all of your work and all of the works that you shared with us. So thank you, everybody. I think we do have a couple of questions. Trying to find them. There was a question. Peter, Billy Lombardo wants to know about that Nixon ceramic over your right shoulder.
How much time you got, Billy? It dates back from those days. It's my brother's. I'm in my mother's office out in Highland Park, and my mother works for the Water Reclamation District. She just won her election. She got more votes in the district than anybody. She ran against a Republican. Hang on one sec. One time I bit the nose off, the top of the nose off as a kid, and my brother didn't speak to me for like a year. And he like surgically put this nose back, and you almost can't see my bite marks. Well, you probably can't anyway, but I can see them anyway.
Excellent.
Thank you for the question, Billy. A great Chicago writer, Billy Lombardo. Nice to see you.
And then Allison Manley wants to know if readers have a favorite romantic movie. I do, but I can't remember the title of it. Oh my gosh, this is killing me. It's an Italian film. Cinema Paradiso. That's my absolute favorite romantic movie. Cinema Paradiso. Yeah. Any others?
I'll say an obvious one, a sure thing.
The Apartment.
Mm-hmm.
Apartment.
Yep. I love you, Miss Kubelik.
Dipika, did you have one, or you don't need to?
Oh, I don't know. I think I have quite a few, but if I had to just pick one out of the top of my head, I like anything with Meryl Streep. So Bridges of Madison County.
Mm-hmm.
But I have that's a Hollywood movie, and my Bollywood movie. There are just so many also. So I'm just going to stop.
Okay, good. And then there are a couple of questions about the most romantic place in Chicago.
Holy cow. It's not the first thing I think of when I think of Chicago. The lakefront somewhere.
The beach. The beach.
Beach. Yeah.
I would like to say that the Great Rivers Fountain outside the Art Institute,
Yeah.
which is gorgeous little place that I absolutely find so wonderful. Yeah.
And I would probably say outside of the planetarium, where you can see the water and then the skyline behind it, seems very romantic to me. Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions?
Someone asked in the chat, which work of your own do you return to for the writers most often, and what is it that brings you back to it of your own? And for me, it's none of them, and Wild Horses couldn't drag me. So, no
it is
offense.
hard. It becomes yeah, it becomes hard to revisit. Even reading a piece that it's hard to channel it. It's hard to get back into it. I mean, what's nice is sometimes it's surprisingly like it isn't as bad as you thought, kind of thing. But
Sometimes.
yeah, but it's usually not. Yeah, the idea of taking it off the shelf, and sometimes I open a book off the shelf and I do this test. I'll just throw my finger down and pick one sentence, and if that sentence is okay, I can sleep at night. But that's as far as I go.
I find myself correcting my sentences as I'm reading out loud in public, I'm just like, oh my God, did I really write it that way? But I have to say that I keep going back to Ode to Broken Things, which is like, my debut novel, only because I'm writing a sequel, kind of a sequel. It's not completely a sequel, but I kind of have to know, what
Right.
happened.
Got to get the details right. Right.
I go back to whatever isn't finished at the moment. Yeah, otherwise I don't really, unless I'm doing a reading and I have to pull something out and then I'm just thinking about what's the amount of time. When it's done, it's done. Yeah.
People say, do you miss the characters and everything? No, go out and earn your living. You've been hanging around.
Right. Right. Do your thing.
Doritos, taking up space. Oh my goodness.
Right. Yeah. I'm just going to respond to Barry Benson is saying that sure, the beach is romantic, but not just right now, not right now. But I would say I actually went for a walk along the, well, not on the beach, but along the lakefront the other night when it was 15 degrees and snowing. It was amazing. So beautiful.
I was in because I'm here for an anniversary of my stepfather's death, but I was in Rose Hill Cemetery today, and it was just breathtakingly beautiful. And there's something about the cemetery not having, nobody's tramping around. It's like pure, and so I would include the cemetery as being a romantic place. Maybe not your first choice, but anyway.
Michelle, I know I perhaps should not jump in at this point, but I do have to tell you, I walk the lakefront every single morning, even when it's -4 and when it's 2. I wear double layers, and our lakefront is just a muse to me. I just couldn't live here without it.
Roberta, you are a witness to everyone. You are a witness to us.
Well, I'm very fortunate to be a witness. Am I lucky? It's giving me such a thrill tonight to see what Chicago has produced, what has spawned these beautiful authors and wonderful writing.
So much due to your help, Roberta. So,
Absolutely,
thank you.
Roberta.
Great booksellers in country.
Thank you.
Nice to see you.
Thank you, Peter. Well, it's been a thrill. And Barry just wrote, he walks the lakefront every day too. So anyway,
there's just one more.
Michelle, do you want me to start? Are you finished with the program from your standpoint?
There was one quick question for Peter. Any more Walt and Sarah in the pipeline? Jeff Bogle asked.
Thank you, Jeff, for the question. Every time I kill Walt Kaplan, I think it's over, but then he just keeps coming back. So most likely, yes, I appreciate it. He's somebody who's, I think, appeared in almost everything I've done. I did one book about Namibia where he's not in it, but he'll be back. Yeah, he doesn't go away. He's just endless guy. A furniture store salesman from Fall River, Massachusetts. My mother's father.
Well, that does bring us to the end, so I'm happy to turn it back to Roberta. I just wanted to say a deep, deep thank you to everyone. I know that I'm going to be tomorrow ordering several books from the bookseller. So, and I just want to wish everybody a happy Valentine's Day and say thank you so much for attending.
Thank you. That was great.
Thank you. I hate to see this end. It was just so thrilling. So thank you, though. I do want to encourage everyone, because I do have to play the role of booksellers for a moment. I would love to see everyone attend or go to their bookstore and bookseller here in Chicago and buy the books from Jacqueline Mitchard, Michele, Dipika, and Peter. So just a reminder that booksellers are there to accept you, to warm your hearts, but also to sell books and to share with you some of this wonderful writing that we heard tonight. So it's a thrill, as I said, to be in this beautiful city that has spurned so much beautiful writing. And thank you all for coming. Chicago Literary Hall of Fame is a favorite organization of mine. I'm sort of the newcomer. I've just joined a couple of years ago, but the work they do is just thrilling, and applaud Chicago writers. Next month from today, March 13th, we're having your friend Sandra Cisneros, Jackie, for our Fuller Award. And we hope that everyone, it's 3/13/2021, and we hope that everybody listening is able to join us. It's going to be very, very special. And for those of you who know Sandra Cisneros, she's a Chicagoan still, through and through. I do want to thank again Michele, Jacqueline, Depika, and Peter. And then also the man who has been the technician here, and Rich Rono. So thank you very much for putting this all together. And then the two, I suppose the two people, or the two events, the two institutions that brought food and supplied the food that you were talking about, Catherine Ann Confections and Smart Dating Academy. So again, our wonderful authors, thank you, and goodbye from Chicago Literary Hall of Fame. Keep us in mind, and we'll keep you in mind too. Bye-bye.